friends, fans, and dairy products of all ages. This is Cheese of Ages, coming to you with another direct from webcam review of a tabletop RPG. I'm going to go ahead and fulfill a promise that I made the other day, right away, and review the recently released science fantasy RPG from Monte Cook called Numenera, as you can see down there. And actually it's kind of a weird experience for me. I've intended to review this system. I intended to review it when it came out, but I didn't actually realize it had come out until I spotted it in the store just about a week ago. And I actually haven't had a chance to sit at a table and play it because of the fact that my local game group currently has a heck of a lot of games going on right now, and we're kind of in a state of flux where we're trying to get a stable schedule going on for all our campaigns and which campaigns we're going to keep on going. And I'm also trying to do a playtest campaign in that, so I don't really have time for additional new games. However, I have read the rules in depth and learned them. It's a somewhat rules-light system, so there weren't a lot of rules to pick up on. And I had sort of an advantage over a lot of people going in on this learning this system, while very few people will actually have any difficulty learning the system because it's relatively simple. I had a special advantage because it's actually at a base mechanical level, at its like core, incredibly similar to the system I've been working on for quite a while now. A complete coincidence. So naturally, if it's going to be very similar to the system I'm designing myself, I'm going to have a reasonably positive opinion about it. Mind you, there are some distinct differences in this system that make it drastically different from a fundamental standpoint, but it's also got some of those key similarities there. It's sort of like, comparing Superman to Bizarro Superman. They both have the same intentions, but they have a completely skewed perspective on it, and they both have the same superpowers, but they use them in different ways. So yeah, it's crazy. It's like, looking at it, it's kind of like I have a hive mind with Monte Cook or something, because actually the HP system is and damage system is identical to a fix I suggested not a day before getting the Numenera book about fixing Mutants and Masterminds' damage track system, which tends to be incredibly random, which is combine two ability scores related to toughness and then slap the total on the regular damage track modifiers, I mean, in Mutants and Masterminds' case. In Numenera's case, it takes the score for durability is basically your might, which is a combination of strength and constitution in the mechanical functions of the regular stats system. It's both strength and physical toughness. So while for Mutants and Masterminds I suggested constitution and willpower modifiers, it's still combining two ability score modifiers and slapping it on the Mutants and Masterminds damage track. So it's kind of weird. And then here we have a system that's just full of mechanical similarities to mine that are sort of a mirror reflection. The toughness score being your HP rather than being used to derive your HP bonus. Same. Spending from your ability scores as resources. Same, although in my system you spend from skills first. It's a different system there. The same, but kind of different. In fact, it's down to how the ability scores function in and of themselves, how they're configured, where it's a mirror image as well. Numenera has 3 ability scores, each with 2 different subcategories of them that fulfill the 2 mechanical functions of it, and then a another statistic outside of those ability scores that do something to each of the ability scores that sort of acts like a third mechanical function of each, but it's a separate derived value. Very similar to mine, and all of the mechanical functions of it, all of the dynamics are there. My scores do the same thing, but instead of 3 with subtypes, mine I have 6, and their numbers, the representative values, do everything, rather than being a smaller number doing with multiple other things attached to it. Kind of a little flip there. Same mechanics are covered, different distribution. But anyway, one extra key similarity that is also flipped is the intention of the system. His system was designed with the intention of making the DM's job easier by basically taking away the rules arbitration for every minor little detail. Focus on story, rules light. His intention was making the system rules light to make the DM's job easier, while my intention is to make arbitrating everything easier by making it simple rules heavy. Everything has a rule, but everything is governed by a single universal engine, rather than different charts and everything for every subtle detail of how it works. A complexity, but with an overarching mechanic to make it simple to do a lot. So, simple rules heavy is my angle, his is simple rules light. Both with the same intentions, but flipped. It's like looking in a mirror. So yeah, as tangenty as that was, I've been going on for like 7 minutes comparing it to my own system, because it's just so dang similar. It mainly was to illustrate the point that I have an advantage in learning and understanding the system, because it's very similar. There are some distinct differences though. For one, the DM doesn't make any rolls. All of the enemy modifiers are all derived from the level of the monster. The rules are so light, the accuracy and evasion abilities of the monster are straight off of the difficulty chart for skill checks. Taking on a level 4 monster and trying to hit him or trying to evade him is the same difficulty for trying to pick a level 5 lock. Streamlined. Simple rules and everything like that. In my system, you roll. But anyway, two different systems. Very similar though, and some of the core operations. I won't go into any more detail on that. I've already rambled long enough about it. Numenera is actually a really good rules light system, but it's quite possibly the most rules heavy, rules light system I've ever seen. Rules light, of course, being light on rules, and rules heavy being heavy on rules. So how can they be both at once? Few rules, but they're heavy and bogged down in mechanics. Like I mentioned, there's only 3 ability scores, but there's 3 subtypes that break down the mechanical functions of it. So it effectively means there's 9. But there's not. It's all 3 scores, but different sub-factors of them, different dynamics. In some ways, it's simple, but it's a little over-engineered. It works, and it's good, and I enjoy it being like that. It has its uses. It's complexity that brings something to the table, so I approve. But you could do it somewhat differently and take out the extra mechanic and not need it. I mean, again, I like it, but there's a chart for difficulty, and it's simple. Once you've got the rule down in your head, and you can just flip a little math switch in your head and not even need the chart. The fact that there's 2 things that decide the difficulty of a task, towards resolution. You've got the level of the task, and the target number to beat it is always 3 times that. So if it's a level 1 thing, you need a 3 to overcome it. And if it's a 2, you need a 6 to overcome it. So on and so forth. If it's a 4, you need a 12. Rather than your modifiers adding to the roll, you're rolling the d20 to hit a target number, and your skills and abilities and stuff are lowering the difficulty. So let's say you have a lot of skills and stuff associated with the task you're trying to accomplish. You can lower the difficulty rating of the thing by 4 points, which actually is pretty good for earlier levels. Let's say you can lower the difficulty by 4, and you're doing as a level 4 task. You need to roll a 12, and you've got enough to lower that 4 by 4 to 0. You don't need to roll. Fast and streamlined. I enjoy that. If you can only lower it by 2, you effectively turn that level 2 difficulty into a level 4 difficulty into a level 2 difficulty. It's nice, streamlined, but it's kind of a little strange that there's 2 mechanics. Like, oh, consult this chart here, do the math to determine, it's easy, but it's kind of like, here's 2 things to arbitrate 1 thing, kind of thing. Works, easy, fun, complexity, that adds something. So I really can't complain that heavily about it. Just a minor complaint there. Yeah. And frankly, I don't actually have many major complaints about the system, mechanically speaking. Although it's kind of weird if you're not used to it. For those of you that don't know, Numenera is a system in which you are, its setting is a billion years in the future. Technology progressed to the point where it was magical even by today's standards. And then civilization collapsed, technology restarted, and then advanced back up to the point where it's medieval society again. A medieval society surrounded by the ruins of super technology, often like grabbing technology, fiddling with it, and figuring out a function that's not the intended original function. You'll encounter a gadget and only get to use it once because you don't know how to use it, and you use it wrong and break it. That's the large majority of the magic items in the game that have actual functions rather than just oddities. The large majority of the magic items in the game are basically just like flavor, which are called oddities. They're just like little bitty trinkets, like, oh, you have a cup that heats water, kind of thing. It's a rules-light system with a high emphasis on giving the DM storytelling tools, which I can get behind, and it's a whole enjoyable thing. It's kind of strange in the fact that you are told to make it as weird as possible. You kind of have to learn a completely new style of setting, really, because while it's medieval, it's permeated by sci-fi technology. So you've got to, finagle that in there to you've got to describe technology and how it's interacting, how they're using this technology in the wrong ways, and how this weird, almost alien technology looks and feels. And they just deliberately tell you to not say, oh, they pick up a machine gun. You've got to describe it physically and make the players figure it out what it does. It's a challenge, an interesting one though. And there's not a single monster you'll be familiar with in the book. It's all weird, just made-up crap. Some of it inspired by a Golden Age comic style sci-fi. Like there's a samurai-looking robot with a black hole in its chest. It looks like it's straight out of a Golden Age comic book. And some of the monsters and aesthetics have sort of a sleek sports car Star Wars look to them. Original Star Wars, not like prequel movies. Although it does somewhat have an aesthetic of that too, because streamlined, like sleek Star Wars kind of thing. I hope you know what I'm talking about. And all of the artwork and stuff is generally good, aside from the occasional examples of really bad proportions in human bodies. The aesthetics, the way the campaign's presented, the fact that they deliberately tell you if you're going to make a new monster, make it as weird and patched together as possible, makes the setting come across as really alien, even though it's like sci-fi fantasy and intrinsically isn't anything all that unusual to us. It's presented in a way that makes it seem like, whoa, this is just weird. I enjoy that aspect of it. Another interesting mechanic that I am a little bit mixed on, but mostly in favor of, is their experience points. The large majority of experience points that you earn as a player will be handed to you by the DM as he introduces complications to the situation. And there's an element where you can refuse that complication by, like refusing the HP and then paying the same amount of HP. Not HP, I mean XP. Experience points. You refuse the extra experience points and pay the same amount to basically automatically conquer the complication. Like, let's say the floor drops out from beneath you and he's like moves the experience point to you. It's like, normally you could make a roll to overcome it, but you could automatically succeed it by like pushing that XP back and then paying one that you've got, and you automatically roll to the side. Or you're trying to hack, and then suddenly a circuit over to the side sparks because you pushed a little too much to the side or something like that. You can refuse that complication as long as it's a complication he's doing. He's pushing a XP towards you, indicating that it's a complication, a story element he's introducing that will complicate things. You can refuse that kind of thing and have a little bit of narrative control. Of course, you're effectively paying 2 experience points, which is a lot, to overcome the situation, so you won't do it frequently. It's still an interesting element, especially how the DM like gives these points out. He technically gives you another one that you can give to a teammate that does something cool, kind of element. And there's also a variation of that where you throw it in the extra point into a pool instead, and then after the session the players decide who gets what, kind of divvy it up after the fact, which is probably the version I would use, because in my opinion, like handing out 2 experience points kind of breaks the feel of, oh, I'm doing this thing to you, kind of thing. And this is kind of personal, one-on-one kind of feel to it. Instead of like, I'm pushing these 2 things to you, and one of these things is something you can give someone else. It brings somebody else into the feel of the interaction between player and the DM. Well, I can see how it would be fun to like have like, oh, I got this point. Like, you just like flipped over a chandelier and like caved it in on somebody. Here you go. Kudos. Oh, thank you for saving my life, man. Here's, like, there you go. Kudos. And they also like sell experience cards to represent these experience things, but just like a chitsy over-market engineered piece of paper being slid across the table doesn't have quite the same feel to me. I'd recommend, if you're going to do that and play the system, that you get just like pay like a quarter or like a buck, depending on where you get them from, to get these things called dragon tiers. There's basically just dollops of like glass that are like in colors. Like, get silver ones or whatever color looks futuristic to you, and you can like have those on the side of the table and push them. The feel of like a smooth kind of stone thing in your hands kind of enhances the feel of it, and the metallic kind of like weird design look to it, in my opinion, makes it feel more in tune with the setting of alien technology, rather than just a overly designed flashy card that looks like it came out of Flash Gordon comics. And it feels more like alien and futuristic if there's like this sleek glob of material that like has kind of like a hard feel to it, and makes a scratching sound of glass against table as it goes across the table. Kind of adds to the feel of the situation. It makes it a little bit more visceral than just this over-marketed piece of cardboard. I enjoy that sensation, interaction there. It becomes more visceral the more senses you stimulate. I'm overthinking things here, but you can see what I'm talking about, I hope. Try it, you'll see. Like, just hold like a Magic the Gathering card in your hand and like pass it across a table, and like how that feels, and then like get like one of the dragon tiers if you have them, and just like push it along. Or you can use poker chips maybe. Oh, that would kind of break the feel. Just like compare the feel to pushing a card or pushing a coin across the table and see which one feels more visceral to you. If you don't have Dragon Tears, you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, all in all, this wasn't a very in-depth review. I do like the system. It's a little over-engineered for a rules-light system, and being a rules-light system, it still might not be for everyone. But it is a narrative-driven, but very rules-driven as well, mostly narrative-focused game system. If you like narrative games, you'll enjoy it. If you want like rules crunch, that's like everything has rules to it, you won't care for it. This, despite being rules light and a narratively driven storytelling game, I would classify this as a tabletop role-playing game, unlike Marvel role-playing, because just for the element that there's a whole lot of character customization actually in this game for a rules light system, and you actually make a character even though it's fairly simplified. It's your character, you're playing your character, you're not playing Spider-Man and sticking in a straight line. It feels better. It's more of a role-playing experience. Anyway, next up I will be preparing for my 100 subscriber special and reviewing something very dear to my heart that will be a surprise. Anyway, this is Cheese of Ages signing off.